Then when we moved to Guthrie, after I got out of the Army, I substituted in Oklahoma City at the semester and substituted at Douglas, all the Oklahoma City schools. And I got my first football coaching job at Guthrie. And I knew that was a good spot. And when we lived in Guthrie, I saw all this history. And when I was in high school, I didn't like history, and it was simply because of the way that it was presented. But when we moved to Guthrie, we were only about 6 blocks from the Masonic Temple, which at one time was the Capitol, which I was up in my attic one day. We bought a house, and this house, 2 sisters had lived in it and had it up for an estate sale. So in 1973, 1973, we bought this old house, and Lloyd Lynch Sr. was a realtor there, and he said, you know, you guys really want this house, don't you? We said, yeah, and he said, you know, legally I can't tell you what to bid, but he said, you know, sometimes if you'll add an odd number onto whatever your bid is, you might get that house. And he said, for example, this house, you might say $12,515. Well, hey, Pam and I wrote that number down, put it in the envelope, put it in. We got that house.
Got that house
for $12,515. Over 2,500 square feet. Had a full-size elevator in it because one of the sisters had a boyfriend that couldn't climb the stairs. Oh. Had safety features on that old elevator. It's as big as half the room. We moved all of our upstairs up the deal except for the mattresses. Had safety features on it. And up in the attic I was working, and we bought that old house. Well, we totally remodeled it in the course of 3 years. And
now, were you teaching and coaching at that time?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. But in my spare time, weekends, we'd work on that house. And I was up in the attic, and I found this newspaper that was dated 1882 from Cairo, Illinois. One of the sisters, her father was a Masonic in the Masonic. Anyway, that old newspaper had on the front page whether or not they'd be able to ever harness the energy of kerosene because a priest had knocked his kerosene lantern over and burned his shanty down. Oh. On the inside of this newspaper, it said, if westward expansion continues at the rate that it is, the United States is going to be overpopulated. In 1882, and I'm thinking, holy smokes. On the front side of that paper also, Johnny fell off the horse, broke his arm, they dressed it and sent him home. You know, all of a sudden, this thing that I had such a disdain for, I fell in love with. You know, people do things for a particular reason. I was working out in my front yard one day, and I discovered a brick, so all of a sudden I've got a sidewalk running across the front of my house, and I came across a brick that said, don't spit on the sidewalk. Well, my next door neighbor, Miss Carberry.
The brick itself said that?
Yeah, it was imprinted in the brick that said, don't spit on the sidewalk. Okay. I asked Miss Carberry, who lived next door to us, I said, my goodness, I said, Miss Carberry, because she was native from Guthrie, Oklahoma. And I said, I found the weirdest thing written on this book. And she said, Alger, let me tell you why that is. Back in the day, a modest woman would have the bottom of her dress touching the walkboards or the brick. And these old timers would be chewing that nasty tobacco and be spitting on the sidewalk. So those were printed up. Well, I found 2 of them in it. Somebody stole one of them. I kept the other one. And Alan Douthit, that's at the high school now.
Yes.
When I was a principal at Owasso, he was a history teacher and teacher of the year. So I gave him that brick, along with the newspaper that I had laminated and framed from Cairo, Illinois in 1882. You know, that old house that we had, a 2x4, was actually 2 inches by 4 inches. You couldn't drive a nail in it because they would bend. You'd have to pre-drill a hole. That old house had window transits above all the doors because they didn't have air conditioning.
Oh, no.
And 10-foot ceilings. Exactly, 10-foot ceilings. And all of a sudden I fell in love with history. So I went and got certified in history. so I could teach history or whatever.
Now, was that what you was teaching when you came to Clearwater?
Yeah, that and physical education, and Dr. Salwachter they had me teaching world history, which I didn't much care for, but I did enjoy the history. And after, this is kind of funny, this is reality. I told Dr. Salwachter, I said, hey, I'm not real fond of this world history, but I'd like to teach something that would be relevant and pertinent where kids would remember it. And he said, what would that be? And I said, career education. So I taught career education, and I switched out of history, started teaching that. And then I worked I didn't have my certification at that particular time to be a principal or a vice principal, so they called me an administrative assistant.
Okay.
But I worked in the capacity of being a vice principal. So
Yeah.
I did that 2 hours a day, taught careers 2 hours a day, and then I got to coach.
Okay.